We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
The American people should be extremely grateful and happy. No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. We suffered no casualties. All of our soldiers are safe, and only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases. Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. It is January 11th, 2020, and we'll dispense with the music in the interest of time as we have a lot to talk about here today. Good morning, Vicky Davis. How are you today?
I'm fine, and I've had my head buried in the same stuff you have, so I'm all ready to talk about it.
Yeah, it's really, honestly, there's a lot going on, and I tell you, we've came very, very close to the precipice of something very, very deadly, and with potential catastrophic consequences for the entire world this week. And I don't think I'm over-exaggerating the incident. But when we find out exactly what really happened, this is the thing that really bothers me, Vicky. There's so much disinformation right now among the right. Normally, I see a lot of stuff on the left, but I find myself these days, this past week, I should say, agreeing more with left-wingers and Democrats than I do with right-wingers who I usually agree with. And this is the problem when you're focused on the truth. You don't have any loyalty to one side, one wing or the other of the dialectic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, the reason why is because all of this whole global agenda has been a Republican agenda. As much as I hate to say that, because I'm a conservative, but I'm a paleo-conservative. Our country first. Our country is the only one that matters. Every other country is responsible for their own people and their own business. But the idea since the Reagan administration has been the idea of free trade and open borders, and along with that, a global system of governing.
Yeah.
Because you can't just have open borders and let everybody run free and expect there to be order in the world such that it functions. And so what I've been studying is the redesign of government and the initiation of global systems.
Yeah. Well, one way that they accomplish the redesign of everything is by destroying it first, and there's nothing more destructive than war. And this situation, we started talking about what happened. We gave the timeline last week. I'm not going to go back through that, of course, but we know that Iran did the retaliation that they promised that they would. They had to respond in some way to the United States' provocation. And I do put it that way because if you understand, we still don't know. We still don't know what the initial thing that killed the defense contractor was that set off this whole series of events. To my knowledge,
I would like to know that too.
Yeah, and I don't want to be what I criticize, because I've criticized a lot the fact that people are spouting off everywhere, and I don't care who they are, a bunch of them from all sides spouting off without having any facts. They just want to get their opinions out there when their opinions are ill-informed. And I've went back and forth this week with people on Twitter who seem to have, and I don't have all the answers, but my response to them is, hey, let's just wait and find out what the facts are, because the one person I was responding to or talking to, they said something like, what was he doing over in Iraq? What was Soleimani doing over in Iraq? What was he looking for a vacation property? And I said, I don't know it, because at the time I didn't know what he was doing over there. Now I do, and it's even worse. It's even worse than you could ever imagine if you don't know what's going on. This is very, 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 very bad for Trump. If the American people knew why Soleimani was assassinated, if they knew the treachery that was done by Trump, they would. I think that decent Republicans would demand his recall. Now, there's going to be people.
I need to know.
Well, Iran. Let me just start here. Let me start here with this is a speech. This is the speech that Trump gave. Now, we opened up with part of it. Trump, and he sounded to me very relieved that the thing didn't continue to spiral. Because here's the thing with these types of things, it's tit for tat. We hear a lot about quid pro quos. Well, these are the kind of quid pro quos you don't want, especially because you get one side doing one thing. Hey, I'll do this for you. You're going to do this for me. We don't want those kind of quid pro, and it continues to accelerate over and over and over again until finally you've got an all-out nuclear war with other people getting involved and that sort of thing. And so the concern was, of course, that the United States then would, after Iran bombed our military bases, that the United States would turn around and do something else, and this would just keep going until the point where does it end? The good thing, if there is a good thing in this, and there is, that cooler heads to a certain extent prevailed, I think. I think Iran didn't go all out, probably do as much as they potentially could have. And the United States said, maybe we should stop here because we don't want the world to be a big fireball. So when I listened to the speech that Trump gave, that we're going to put sanctions and it's good that Iran is standing down, I'm thinking, Iran, you're the sons of boogers that started this whole mess, So it's good that you're standing down. But anyway, this is Trump this past Wednesday.
Iran has been the leading sponsor of terrorism, and their pursuit of nuclear weapons threatens the civilized world.
Okay, Iran threatens the civilized world, and there
actually, and I'd like to back up on that and say that it was actually Pakistan, and I forget the name of the Akani network. They were the ones that were spreading nuclear know-how all in the Middle East, to all the Muslim countries. So it was a Pakistani, I believe, that was doing that.
Yeah, there's a lot of lies here, and Trump is up to his eyeballs in the lies. I'll go back to this Reuters article that I've talked about so many times. First of all, let's talk about Saudi Arabia. How much terrorism have they spread? People. This is how the ignorance of the West is a real problem, Vicky, because not all Muslims are the same. And I think there's a tendency among conservative and especially Christians and everything. We don't understand the Muslims. And so because we don't understand it, we lump them all together, but they're not the same. There are Sunni Muslims, there are Shia Muslims. And where all these terrorist groups come from are the Sunni part of that, and it's not all Sunnis. It's the part of the Sunnis. It's the Wahhabists who are Sunnis, but they're the Wahhabist Sunnis, and these are the ones from which we get the vast majority of the extreme Muslim terrorist groups. And Saudi Arabia is a Sunni Wahhabist country, yet we love Saudi Arabia. But Iran is Shia. And you can tell the difference because look at the way they treat their women. Look at the fact that there's 100,000 Christians living in Iran. And they live there safely. You can go to Iran's websites, as I did when all this was going on. Press TV. Press TV is one that you can go to and actually watch. It's in English, but there's a state-run service as well. And I think it's called IRIB, IRIB.IR. It's in Iranian, but you can copy and paste the address if you go to translate.google.com, you can copy and paste that address into that translate page, and you can actually see that page in English and read the articles in English. And I recommend people do that. Don't rely upon the propaganda outlets to give you the truth because they're not doing it. Go to the sources, see what all sides are saying, and then make up your mind based upon what you're seeing.
Well, you know what? I listen to news on Iran, and you'd think that Iran was the worst nation in the entire world.
Absolutely. Because that's what you do in a wartime. You do that to your enemy. If you're trying to destroy somebody or you're trying to do something nefarious to an enemy, you got to first make them out to be dogs. You got to make them out to be inhuman. They're a bunch of monsters and animals. That's typical war stuff. But look at this article, Reuters. Who is funding the Afghan Taliban? You don't want to know. This is from Global Post, right on the Reuters website. It is the open secret no one wants to talk about, the unwelcome truth that most prefer to hide. In Afghanistan, one of the richest sources of Taliban funding is the foreign assistance coming into the country. Virtually every major project includes a healthy cut for the insurgents, call it protection money, call it extortion, or as the Taliban themselves prefer to term it, spoils of war. The fact remains that international donors, primarily the United States, are to a large extent financing their own enemy. Everyone knows this is going on, said one U.S. Embassy official speaking privately. It is almost impossible to determine how much the insurgents are spending, making it difficult to pinpoint the sources of the funds. Anyway, it goes on from there. The point is, we have been funding all of these groups for a long time, people.
Well, if you look at the USAID agenda and global governance, the initiatives for global governance, you understand why. So they're working at cross purposes. They're giving the money to these international groups for, quote, development.
Yes.
But then they use that money for terrorist activities, which we then fight. I mean, it's insane. The whole global system, the whole movement towards global governance is absolutely insane. It's schizophrenic, and if you take the time to sort it all out, to see what is actually happening, you'd say, what are we doing? What are we doing here? But there's a lot of people making a lot of money on it. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, my whole point in saying this, and you're absolutely right, is the United States is really the largest state sponsor of terrorism. I mean, that's just a fact. But there's also Saudi Arabia. In fact, the Huffington Post did a really good article. And it's Democrats primarily over at the Huffington Post. It's a very, I go over there a lot of times to laugh at the liberals. But honestly, when it comes to this stuff, I find no truth, no sanity on the Republican side of things. Saudi Arabia, not Iran, is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world today, and Wahhabism remains the source of most radical Islam extremism. For years, Iran has borne the inevitable title of world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism. However, out of the 61 groups that are designed as terrorist organizations by the U.S. State Department, the overwhelming majority are Wahhabi-inspired and Saudi-funded groups with a focus on the West and Iran as their primary enemy. Only 2 are Shia, Hezbollah and Kataib Hezbollah. Now, and see, there it is. There's 2 different. That's the other source of fusion, is that there are 2 different Hezbollahs, and people are getting those 2 confused. One's, I guess, really bad. I haven't looked into this real deeply, but one's really bad, and the other one not so much. And so a lot of times when they're saying that Iran is funding Hezbollah, it gets murky because the names are similar. Anyway, only 4 have ever claimed to receive any support from Iran. Terrorist groups they're talking about. Nearly all of the Sunni militant groups listed receive significant support from either the Saudi government or Saudi citizens. So it goes on from there and it explains what Wahhabism is and everything. So I'll put that article as everything we're talking about will be in the show notes.
Well, wait a minute. You said Saudi citizens. That would be the royal family, so it's really the same thing.
Yeah.
Right, because they're the only ones that have any money over in Saudi Arabia, right?
I guess. I don't pretend to know what the status of the citizens are. I haven't really looked into that. But, that's probably true. I can't argue that point at this point. But here's the problem. Trump, let me get back to the audio. Trump went on to address the assassination. Because I'm going to set the argument up, folks. I'm going to let him set it up, and then we're going to knock it down.
Last week, we took decisive action to stop a ruthless terrorist from threatening American lives. At my direction, the United States military eliminated the world's top terrorist, Qassem-Soleimani. As the head of the Quds Force, Soleimani was personally responsible for some of the absolutely worst atrocities. He trained terrorist armies, including Hezbollah, launching terrorist strikes against civilian targets. He fueled bloody civil wars all across the region. He viciously wounded and murdered thousands of U.S. troops, including the planting of roadside bombs that maim and dismember their victims. Soleimani directed the recent attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq that badly wounded 4 service members and killed 1 American, and he orchestrated the violent assault on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. In recent days, he was planning new attacks on American targets, but we stopped him. Soleimani's hands were drenched in both American and Iranian blood.
Okay, that all sounds pretty damning, doesn't it? But
yeah, and those IEDs, that really upsets me, and I've always wondered whose technology it was and who was funding it. And I don't believe necessarily that it was Iran.
No.
I'm sure they got them from China, probably.
Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind, Soleimani was a general. When you're a general, you are over an army. Armies kill people. That's what they do, especially in time of war. To make the leap from that to the terrorism is, and I'm not full abreast of all of Iran's history, with all the wars and everything, but I do know that, they were engaged in war with Iraq, and the United States was right in the middle of all that too. So, my point is there may have been periods in time where something he did resulted in deaths of Americans. It's entirely possible. But I still haven't heard any real, I guess a lot of these claims, where's the evidence? I don't know where the evidence is.
You know what? I heard a report saying that it may have been Trump that said this or somebody else. I'd call him on the phone, but their phone system apparently is not modernized. Well, that would make Iran a terrorist nation, because if they can't bring in a modern telephone system, they can't bring in the internet, they can't bring in the that's global technocratic tyranny.
That's bullcrap anyway, because that's
why they took out was it Bosnia or what was the Milosevic? He wouldn't give up control of his phone company.
Well, that sounds like a story. I mean, that sounds...
No. It's very serious. I'm being very serious.
Is that the reason? That's the reason they gave?
Well, I no, they didn't give that reason. But if you understand global systems, if you understand what they're trying to do with globalization, the telecommunications system is absolutely essential.
Okay.
Absolutely essential. They can't proceed with anything until they get the modern telecommunications system into place. And then they can come in sneaking in like burglars in the night and bring in the systems and rally the people, with the cell phone, rent a mob kind of, all the stuff that they do. But the essential element is the telecommunications system.
Yeah. Well,
as bizarre, as ridiculous as that sounds.
In the 21st century, for Trump to suggest, and I'm not saying he did, I don't know, but for him to suggest that he doesn't have a way of getting a hold of the Iranian government would be the height of frivolity, because I know for a fact that he
throw
did,
these
in fact,
things out, and most people just have no clue.
Yeah,
they have no clue about.
Yeah. He most certainly did get a hold of the Iranian government, because, and this leads us to the treachery that he did. Let me just, the fact is that the more I learn about the qassem-soleimani, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm listening.
The fact that the more I learn about qassem-soleimani, because, again, this is what you do, folks, when you are trying to destroy somebody, or you're trying to you have to sell it. You have to sell your war the very same way a used car salesman sells an old jalopy, okay? Somebody doesn't really want to buy something, and you're trying to sell it to them. You have to make it look appealing in some way. And the idea is that this guy is so evil, so diabolical, that we just got to destroy him. But the more I learn about him, the more it seems like he's not the demon, Vicky, that they're making him out to be. As a matter of fact, he was, I don't know if you know this, but he was instrumental in the defeat of ISIS in Iraq.
That's what I keep hearing in little bits and pieces, was that he was fighting ISIS.
Yes, and that's why he was so popular among the people. He was invited into Iraq by the prime minister to help defeat ISIS. That's where the claim that some of the Iraqi forces are Iranian-backed militias. They were only getting orders from Iran insofar as they were fighting ISIS, because the prime minister invited them in after during the Obama administration, the administration pulled back funding. So the U.S. troops weren't doing much. Of course, we were also helping ISIS too, because even though we were fighting them, we were trying to get them. The whole point was, and those Judicial Watch. We have Judicial Watch. I'll see if I can find them, stick them in the show notes. But Judicial Watch had obtained documents that showed that they were planning behind the scenes a Salafi group that would take power and declare a caliphate. And right after that, ISIS shows up.
Salafi, that's Turkish, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the supply lines, I'll have to go back and read the documents again to make sure I'm getting that right. But those Judicial Watch documents were very, very important.
Let's back up to the Iraq War. You remember right after the war, it took about 3 days to destroy Baghdad, and a little bit after that to take out Saddam. Mm-hmm. Rumsfeld say, when the international community said, they're stealing the antiquities from the museums, they're destroying everything, and Donald Rumsfeld says, well, free people are free to do, whatever they want.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Basically. And so, and then they dismantled the Iraqi army. They dismantled the nation state of Iraq.
Yeah.
And then we've spent all this 17 years looking like we're trying to rebuild it, but not exactly. Not exactly. They're trying to establish a regional power.
Yeah.
And so, so you're right. The U.S. did cause this. They caused the whole darn thing with this idea of freedom, 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 and global governance.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, as I see it, they were the United States officials, especially the neocons, are probably very upset with the fact that Soleimani was destroying the little terrorist group that they worked so hard to build up. Because, hey, remember the goal. The Oded Yanan plan. They want to balkanize the Middle East, folks. They want to break it apart into little pieces to make it more easy to manage, more easy to control, and more easy to steal their land.
But they need that telecommunications system, because with the telecommunications comes the surveillance, and then anybody that even looks sideways, they can nail them. Just you remember those images of Bradley Manning and the contractors just shooting those people in the street?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that they can do once they get the surveillance systems set up, that just decide somebody is a terrorist and, shoot them. Use a drone and shoot them.
Yeah. Now,
so that may be why Iran shot down those drones.
But we know it's all, in another claim that Trump has said is that they were about to attack our embassies. Here's the thing, folks. Even if that were true, and it's not, but we know it's not, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But if it were true, generals just give orders. If they were about to attack our embassies, killing Soleimani wouldn't stop the attack. The attack could easily move forward without him, and would, because somebody else would give the orders.
That's true. You're right about that.
So that's just stupid to even say that. But they're grasping at straws, trying to say whatever they can as to why they needed to take this guy out. The fact is, it's all a lie. We know it from the Iraqi prime minister, who has no motive to lie about it. I mean, he was pretty much an ally of the United States prior to this all going down. Soleimani was but here's the thing. This is what the treachery is, Vicky. Soleimani was actually lured to Iraq by the Trump administration on a diplomatic peace mission.
Okay, that does not surprise me one bit. Does not surprise me.
He and his entourage came to Iraq to further the prospect of peace and Trump had him blown up. And now, I want you to listen. This is Elijah Mowray. He's a veteran war correspondent on the ground over there, and listen to what he had to say about this whole thing.
Let me tell you a few points that are really essential for people to know and understand. Now, I've met Soleimani several times in Iraq on different occasions. And yes, indeed, Soleimani was never known in all his history when he used to travel to the region until he started to travel to Iraq. Soleimani had the function, the official function of being military advisor to the Iraqi government, appointed by the Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki, reconfirmed by the pro-U.S. Prime Minister Haider Abadi, confirmed by the Foreign Minister Brahim Jafari, who asked Soleimani to come with whatever he can to support the Iraqi government to defeat ISIS and to remove ISIS from Iraq when ISIS occupied a third of the country. That is the first official function. The second official function is there are two aspects that the Prime Minister yesterday of Iraq revealed yesterday. The first is Trump asked the Prime Minister of Iraq, Adel Abdel Mahdi, to talk to the Iranians, to mediate with the Iranians, to de-escalate the situation in the Middle East and to find a way out, because he wanted to go for the election in 2020 in peace. And also because Iran asked the Saudis to open up the dialogue between the two states and to ease the tension in the Middle East, and the Saudi had an answer. So Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi of Iraq called Soleimani, because Soleimani travels frequently to Iraq according to the request of the Iraqi government, exactly like they asked any American general to come to the area and to support them against ISIS. The difference is Iraq is just a neighboring country and the Americans come from thousands of miles away. And when he asked him to come, he gave him an appointment the next morning at 8:30 at his office to come and talk about, first, the Trump initiative, and second, the Saudi initiative. And what happened is a drone was waiting for him at the airport in the middle of the night, and as Trump said, terminated him. But he did not only kill an Iranian general who is an envoy of his country and who is asked to come and to have a diplomatic and a mediation role by Iraq. He also killed another Iraqi general and 6 other officers, 3 Iranian and 3 Iraqi, all in the 2 cars that were destroyed yesterday. So basically, this is exactly what happened.
So Soleimani was invited in to help defeat ISIS, and he was instrumental in helping to do that. And Trump asked the Iranians to help negotiate peace in the Middle East. So it was on that promise of peace that Soleimani and his boys went to Iraq, where Trump had a drone waiting for him to blow him up. So they were basically ambushed and assassinated in a mafia-style hit job while on a diplomatic mission for peace.
So who would have been the ones that set up the demonstrations at the embassy?
That was actual angry Iraqis. They were ticked off because people were killed in the United States. Prior to that, the United States had bombed. Remember, there was the initial attack, which we still don't know where that came from. That, at least as far as I know, we don't. I mean, I don't know. There was that initial attack, which could very well have been a false flag. I'm not saying it was or it wasn't. But somebody set off an attack that killed a defense contractor and injured some people. And the United States retaliated by bombing along the Syrian border, which killed some Iraqis. And these Iraqis were very, very angry, and went to the embassy and attacked the embassy. And the point about that embassy, the embassy is huge and is heavily fortified. These people had zero chance of ever getting in there. They may have breached an outer wall of it and did some damage to an outer wall, but this thing is so heavily fortified that there's no chance that they would that they could ever actually get in there. But these were angry Iraqis. In fact, we covered that last week on the show here. But some of these peoples, it killed their relatives.
Yeah, that's the what they call the green zone, where the fusion center is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, that was just natural. That appears to be just natural blowback as a result of our retaliation. And, of course, now, since all this has happened, we've been asked to leave or demanded to leave. And, very predictably, we're not leaving. Although they did put out a letter saying that we're leaving. And then they said, oops, we didn't mean to put out that letter. I mean, you got to ask yourself the question, who the heck is control? Is anybody in control in Washington, D.C., or do they have any set policy for the Middle East? Other than, I think the policy is to destabilize, as it has been pretty much our whole lives, is to destabilize.
Well, that's where the strategic plans come in for global governance. And it's really the U.S. that is behind the whole damn thing. So, and when you look at it when you ignore all the details at the country level of how it's destroying countries and all of that, and you look at it from the diplomatic level, the strategic planning for global governance, that's where you can see how they're implementing it and how it's destroying nation states. Yeah. It's destroying countries. And that's the objective. That is their objective.
The thing is I voted for Trump, but I didn't vote for this. This is the very definition of state-sponsored terrorism. When the United States will assassinate a diplomat or an ambassador for peace, how can any nation trust the United States? Who's going to be willing to meet with the United States when they get the phone call that, hey, we want to broker a deal, and you got in the back of your mind, well, gee, Soleimani wanted to broker a deal too, and look what happened to him.
Yeah, well, you know what? I would never take sides against my country, but I sure as heck will take sides against the criminals that are leading it, because they are criminals.
To me, it's not a matter of taking sides. It's about the truth. It's about the truth.
Well, but that breaks down to sides. whether you like to say that or not, it does. And with our government's participation in the UN system and the movement towards global governance, our government has become a criminal enterprise. And that's just a fact. It's a fact. We do not have what I would call a good American government, because an American government that I knew and believed in wouldn't be implementing these global systems. And that's just the way I feel about it,
Yeah, Max Blumenthal wrote a good thing there's a website called thegrayzone.com, and I think he nails it pretty well here. The Iraqi prime minister reveals Soleimani was on a peace mission when assassinated, exploiting Trump's lie of imminent attacks. He says the Trump administration claimed Iranian General Qassem-Soleimani was planning imminent attacks on U.S. interests when it assassinated him. That lie was just destroyed, but not before countless corporate media outlets transmitted it to the public. And isn't it amazing how the media will scrutinize everything Trump says until it comes to war, until it comes to something like this? It's one of the most important things you can scrutinize. he says, desperate to justify the U.S. drone assassination of Iranian Major General Qassem-Soleimani, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo insisted that Washington had made an intelligence-based assessment that Soleimani was actively planning in the region to attack American interests before he was killed. President Donald Trump justified his fateful decision to kill the Iranian general in even more explicit language, declaring that Soleimani was planning imminent attacks on U.S. diplomatic facilities and personnel across the Middle East. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war, Trump claimed. Trump's dubious rationale for an indisputably criminal assassination has been repeated widely across corporate media networks and often without any skepticism or debate. At a January 3rd State Department briefing, get this, Vicky, where reporters finally got the chance to demand evidence for the claim of an quote-unquote imminent threat, one U.S. official erupted in anger. He barked, "Jesus, do we have to explain why we do these things?"
Yeah. Okay, but there's one thing now. Last week we found out that Mike Pompeo worked for the Koch brothers. Mm-hmm. That explains to me everything I need to know about Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I didn't know that about Pompeo. But anyway, 2 days later, Max continues, the Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi addressed his country's parliament. Trump's justification for killing Soleimani was exposed as a cynical lie. According to Abdul Mahdi, he had planned to meet Soleimani on the morning the general was killed to discuss a diplomatic rapprochement with Iraq that Iraq was brokering between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Abdul Mahdi said that Trump personally thanked him for the efforts, the impression that the Iranian general was safe to travel to Baghdad. He said, and this was quoted, by the way, by a Washington Post journalist. Now you can say, well, it's a Washington Post. You just heard from that other journalist a moment ago. We played the audio from him. The Washington Post, by the way, just in case anybody says, well, yeah, it's a Washington Post. Listen, if the Washington Post, who's owned by Amazon.com, who has defense contractors and intelligence contracts, if they're going to be biased in any way, they're going to be biased in favor of the official narrative, not against. So let's just put that argument to bed right now. But all this reporter was doing on the ground, and the reporter's name is Mustafa Salem, was quoting what the Prime Minister himself had said in the press conference. And this is a quote from the Iraqi Prime Minister. Quote, I was supposed to meet Soleimani at the morning the day he was killed. He came to deliver me a message from Iran, responding to the message we delivered from Saudi to Iran. Unquote. So, and he said a lot of other things. I won't read the entire thread. We'll have it in the show notes. Continuing here. Soleimani had arrived in Baghdad not to plan attacks on American targets, but to coordinate de-escalation with Saudi Arabia. Indeed, he was killed while on an actual peace mission that could have created political distance between the Gulf monarchy and members of the U.S.-led anti-Iran axis like Israel. The catastrophic results of Soleimani's killing recall the Obama administration's 2016 assassination of Mullah Akhtar Mohammed Mansour, a Taliban leader who was eager to negotiate a peaceful end to the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. Mansour's death wound up empowering hardline figures in the Taliban who favored a total military victory over the U.S. and triggered an uptick in violence across the country, dooming hopes for a negotiated exit. Since Soleimani's assassination, Iraq's parliament has voted to expel all U.S. troops from the country, and Iran's Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has sworn to exact severe revenge. And, of course, we already know that they bombed our bases over there. Trump, for his part, tweeted a litany of gangster-like threats. I'll skip down here. Trump's treacherous assassination has brought the U.S. closer to war than ever before against a country more militarily potent than any adversary it has faced since the Korean War. And as the failed U.S. invasion of Iraq, Washington's reasons for triggering this conflict was based on falsified intelligence sold to Americans by administration officials and on a pliant Beltway media acting as their megaphone. With its claim of imminent attacks, the Trump administration has essentially remixed Condoleezza Rice's 2003 warning that we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. Back then, the U.S. attacked a sovereign state to get rid of weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. This time, it killed the second most important Iranian official to prevent a killing spree that was not on the way. And the Trump administration officials knew they were lying. In fact, Pompeo, now get this, Pompeo, your boy Pompeo, Vicky, Mr. Koch brother, he pitched assassinating Soleimani to Trump several months ago, well before any attacks were imminent and in the wake of the general's killing. A U.S. official revealed to the New York Times that the NSA had intercepted communications the United States had between Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and General Soleimani, showing that the Ayatollah had not yet approved any plans by the general for an attack. But the preponderance of evidence exposing Trump's basis for killing Soleimani as a titanic lie has not generated the same level of media interest, as the lie itself.
Well, of course, because the CIA is all in on this global governance thing. They're the covert agency that has operatives and intelligence, and so.
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave that.
They'll swing whatever way. I mean, we have on the left the CNN, MSNBC, and then used to be on the right Fox News, but they never actually discuss the real issues. It's always just sensationalism, infotainment that passes as news is what it is.
So there's a number of different things about this, but we also have learned, just yesterday I learned this, that in fact it came out yesterday, that Trump reportedly told associates he killed Qassem-Soleimani because he was under pressure from GOP senators before his impeachment trial. So we know Pompeo was lobbying for months for him to kill Soleimani. And we also know that the impeachment fiasco, apparently, according to what's being told here anyway, played a role. There were evidently people in Congress as well, in the Senate, Republicans, that were pressuring Trump to kill Soleimani. It's like, you do this and we'll make the impeachment go away. We'll make the conviction go away.
That wouldn't surprise me a bit, because Republicans are just up to their eyeballs in this criminal activity for global governance. And so they have a lot on the line, too. Their careers, their reputations, everything. So it wouldn't surprise me a bit if there was a deal.
And also, I do want to point out, we have breaking news this morning. In the midst of all this, and I haven't mentioned this on the show, most of the audience will know, there was actually a commercial airline jet, a Ukrainian jet, and I forget the name of the airline, but that was shot down. Well, it crashed shortly after takeoff, and there was some speculation, some questions as to whether this just happened to be a coincidence or, why it crashed. Iran had originally said that it was engine trouble. I believe there were like 176 people on board. All of them died. It was a total loss. But Iran had originally said it was engine trouble. Ukraine opened up a criminal investigation, and there were some people that went over there and looked at it, and turns out now under pressure, Iran is backtracking on its story, and they said that there is a senior IRGC commander has now accepted responsibility for shooting down the Ukrainian jet, saying it was mistaken for a missile. So I would just add to that, in addition to the people that were killed, I would also put this on Trump. The blood of those 176 people are on Trump's hands as well, because this would not have happened had this whole incident not spiraled, and it escalated to the point that it had. So,
yeah, I don't believe that story. I don't believe that they mistook it for a missile.
Well, I could see how, and again, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not here to defend Iran. Iran was out for revenge, but it seems to me like if you're going to shoot down a commercial jet and you want to kill Americans because that's who you're going for to get your revenge against. And there were no Americans on board. There were some Canadians, but it wasn't Canada that killed Soleimani. It was the United States. So
but you don't know who else was on the airplane. I mean, it could
they
be.
got the passenger list.
Could be anything, but the idea that a commercial jet. I mean, they have to be able to coordinate their commercial takeoffs. The military has to be aware of commercial airplane takeoffs, right? So even if he takes responsibility for it and says it was a mistake, I don't believe it was a mistake. Well, I don't know why they would do that, but there's got to be a reason why they did that.
I don't know. I mean, they use the phrase "the fog of war." I don't know, but that's what's being claimed right now. And whether or
the
not,
fog of spies and
well,
with other people that they have to take out, no matter what.
Yeah, well, listen, I have no, I don't, and that would be conjecture, I think, at this point. But I don't know. There could have been spies on board. I'm not going to say it was or wasn't because I'm trying to be journalistic here. And just put out the facts. Because one thing that's driving me crazy is seeing so many people on social media, on Twitter, in different places, just putting things out there that they hear, this is, and they adopted their opinion because it's on Fox or it's on MSNBC. Instead of actually, and I've sent some information to these people and they won't even look at it. It's one thing if you're ignorant about something, and then, but when somebody comes and tries to enlighten you on something, and you won't even look at the information before you just continue on the path that you're at, that's graduating from ignorance to stupidity, in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand your frustration, but what those people, they should be able to say whatever it is that they think, but they should make sure and say, this is what I think. This is what I believe. I don't know it for a fact, but I believe what they're saying is baloney.
Well, and then
there's nothing to argue about.
Well, opinions should be based upon facts, in my opinion. Right. Tell you what, let's go to the phones. We've got Dan in Kentucky on the line. Let's see what he's got to say. Hello, Dan. Good morning.
Darren, Vicky, great show as always. I'm getting a little feedback, but I'll ignore it.
Yeah, I think that's the bridge. There's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, I know. Listen, that Ukrainian, that was the Ukrainian flight, and from what I've found out, they Ukraine is investigating Iran arms deals from the money that Obama gave them from that fake Iranian treaty that never got signed. And that's involved with Hunter Biden and all of that. But you're right, Trump is still to blame for that because Durham, Barr, Humer, none of that's going to go anywhere because Lindsey Graham is just as dirty and involved in the same thing as Hunter Biden is. So Trump had asked the Ukraine to investigate all that, and all of those arms deals were going from the Democrats through Ukraine and Iran to all over the Middle East. But since Graham is guilty to all of these posturings by Durham, etc., they're not going to go anywhere, in my opinion. But the other thing is about Soleimani. That quote I've mentioned before, Alan Hart was a British journalist. He's dead now. But he had a quote, "The Arabs never do what they say they will do, and the Jews do what they say they will never do. So that's the whole history of the conflict in the Middle East. And if you look at who benefits, it's Israel and Britain.
Yes.
Israel, because they control all the computer and communications technology, and it's easy for them to set up drones and hack into things, and run all of that. And England is to blame because they set up the whole Islamic Brotherhood for, in this each century, for 3 centuries, they've been setting up the Wahhabis, and in the 1920s they set up the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt, and Lawrence of Arabia was a fake, and all of this is going on. So I think the problem is that Alan Watt used to say that the eagle hides behind the seal of the United States and uses one wing and then another. And, sometimes they use the Zionist wing, sometimes they use the communist wing. And that's what they're doing back and forth, and that's why Huffington Post, for example, has better articles than the Republicans do right now.
On this subject, yeah.
And who...
Hang on just a minute. Dan...
attention off of...
Hey, Dan, we got to take the top of the hour break. If you want to hold on, I'll hold you over.
Yeah, stay with us. I'm interested in what you're saying.
Stay with us, folks. Hour number 2 of Govern America is straight ahead. We'll hold Dan over, so just hang with us. We'll be back.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order. New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 11th of January 2020. I kind of rearranged things here in the studio, so my clock is in a different place with the date on it. But anyway, we're continuing on here. Happy to survive the no mushroom clouds today, folks. That's a good thing. That's always, every day without a mushroom cloud is a good thing. And
yeah, that's true. Can't argue there.
So anyway, we got Daniel in Kentucky on the line right now. And Daniel, did you? I wanted to get back to what you were saying there.
Yeah, you're right about the mushroom clouds because Vanunu in Israel discovered that in Dimona in 1962, Israel had nuclear weapons, so they've had them for, 48 years now. And so there's the mushroom cloud that is secret and hanging over the Middle East and probably That's one of the reasons Kennedy got killed, because of he wanted Israel denuclearized, and he wanted our Treasury money instead of the Fed, and out of Vietnam, and all kinds of things. He made a lot of enemies. Bob Chapman told me one time the key is that all intelligence services at the top work together.
Yeah.
What they're working on is this communications technocratic system, like you have done so well researching, Vicky, and the key to that is efficiency over effectiveness. That's why they need to build in all kinds of redundancies so they can control systems. And you're right, if Iran didn't have the phone system, then they couldn't get control. But the problem is, if you go back to 1943 and controversy of Zion, Douglas Reed, and he wasn't able to have his book published for 22 years at the end of his life. He said that the communists under FDR had card files for selective service where only communists got promoted. And these people controlled selective service, so during the war and always after that, only their people got promoted. Now, people think the communists and the Zionists are two branches, but they're left and right wing of that eagle hiding behind the surface of the seal. So, like Orwell said, they run both sides of the Spanish Civil War and all that, and I mentioned before. But if you look at who benefits, it's Israel.
Yes.
Because now nobody can trust Trump. Nobody can trust the U.S. Nobody will be able to have any peace proposal, because the best peace proposal they've ever had with Soleimani has been sabotaged.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about the sum of it.
And who benefits? Israel and Britain.
Yeah, because Israel wants war in the Middle East.
System for Israel to be in the Middle East as a token, but controlling the technology and all the communications devices. And did you see the report recently that there was a report that Epstein did not kill himself? So they're covering that up with all this war stuff going on. Ghislaine Maxwell is still in Israel, and they're running all of these pedophile networks, and they've got the communication. They set up all these drones and whatever, and all the money gets funneled to the City of London. So it's the same. It's us against them. And if you look at who benefits, the U.S. has lost any kind of credibility at all, because Trump lied and sabotaged a true peace proposal. The Iranians have a proverb, and the proverb is an old Persian proverb, and it is, thunder and a lie can be heard at a great distance.
Yeah, boy, that's a good proverb. I like that. I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you very much.
God bless you all.
God bless you, sir. We'll talk to you later. All right, there he is, Dan in Kentucky. Any thoughts, Vicky?
Yeah, they can't allow peace to happen until they get all of the systems for, quote, counterterrorism in place. They have to keep the pond bubbling, until everything is in place, and then there will be peace, but it will be a global technocratic, totalitarian kind of peace.
Yeah.
Where there will be no more freedom, period.
Yeah, we'll talk about their peace here in a minute. Because I want to go next to the U.S. Institute of Peace, that hearing that you sent here in just a second. But before we do, there's one other thing I want to do that's somewhat related to this, what we've been talking about. I want to illustrate the dishonesty that happens, because I've been talking about, because we like to beat up on the left a lot of times, because I tend to lean more toward the right, I would say. Even though I don't like the dialectical scale, I like to be outside the dialectic. But if you had to put me on a dialectical scale, my tendency would be more toward the right, although there are certain issues that I'm not on the right. I very much am. It depends upon what the issue is, as to where I stand on an issue. But to illustrate this dishonesty that happens on both the left and the right, an account calling themselves Barron Trump, and I don't believe it's the official Barron Trump. I don't even know that Barron has a Barron, I believe, is Melania's son, the little boy. I don't even think he has an official Twitter account. I could be wrong on that, but the account called themselves Barron Trump. They posted a clip of Hillary Clinton, and it may very well have been something that they got somewhere else. I don't know where this video came from. I don't know who clipped it, but this is a video of Hillary Clinton saying what she would do if she were president. Now, what I'm going to do, and it pertains to Iran, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play what was tweeted out. And when I saw this, I almost gasped. And I thought, well, geez, so I retweet, and this is bad on me, but I thought it looks completely authentic when you say it. And it was authentic, but there's more to the story. So I retweeted it, and then when I learned yesterday, when I went back, because I was about to excoriate Hillary Clinton on the show here, I went back and dug into it a little deeper, and I found the dishonesty. And so I went to Twitter and unretweeted it, because I don't want to be spreading misinformation or even things that are dishonest. She really said these words. That part is true. I'll get to it in a moment what's not true, but I'm doing this because I want to illustrate the dishonesty on both sides. So first I'm going to play for you what was there in that video on the tweet. This is Hillary Clinton on Iran.
If I'm the president, we will attack Iran. Whatever stage of development they might be in their nuclear weapons program in the next 10 years, during which they might foolishly consider launching an attack on Israel, we would be able to totally obliterate them. That's a terrible thing to say, but those people who run Iran need to understand that, because that perhaps will deter them from doing something that would be reckless, foolish, and tragic.
Okay, so she said in that clip, if I get to be president, or if I'm president, we're going to attack Iran. Isn't that what you just heard?
Yeah.
Here's the whole clip. What they did is they edited off the first part. So the clip was actually taken out of context. Now, it's bad enough in context, but this is the full spectrum of what she said.
Well, the question was, if Iran were to launch a nuclear attack on Israel, what would our response be? And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. Whatever stage of development they might be in their nuclear weapons program in the next 10 years, during which they might foolishly consider launching an attack on Israel, we would be able to totally obliterate them.
Okay. You see the difference?
Yeah.
In the first clip, which is the same clip, all I did is go in part of it, she said, if I'm president, we're going to attack Iran. But what was cut off in that clip is the first part, which says, if they attack Israel with a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon, people.
Oh, yeah, that's a big difference.
That's a huge omission.
Yeah.
Now, I'm no fan of Hillary Clinton. I'm not here to defend Hillary Clinton. I despise the woman. I think she would be in a... You know what? I have every reason to believe that if Hillary Clinton was president, that she would not have stopped after Iran attacked our military bases over there. She more than likely, I can't say that for sure. Obviously, I'm not a seer of things not present. But I can tell you that I don't trust Hillary Clinton. I think the war with Iran would probably have gone a lot sooner had she been president. So I'm not here to defend Hillary Clinton. But what I'm here to defend, folks, is the truth. And if we're going to actually get anywhere as far as getting any semblance of decency in our country back, if that's even possible. But we have to start from a standpoint of truth. And it's got to be from both sides. This dishonesty to promote some kind of agenda. Somebody deliberately cut that at that point to incite the right because they're pushing this dialectical game of pitting both sides against each other.
Yeah, that's the favorite trick of the media, is to take things out of context, cut things out at just the right moment, and then explains what the rest of the story is, but the rest of the story is a lie based on what was said prior.
Yeah. So, anyway, that was the little object lesson I wanted to present. Now, turning a page here, Vicky, you sent me the U.S. Institute of Peace panel, which was discussing the subject of strengthening governance of fragile states. Mm-hmm. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright was there. The moderator was Nick Schifrin, I believe was his name. He was from the PBS Snooze Hour. He kicked it off with something we can all agree on. You know, what a miserable failure U.S. foreign policy has been.
It seems to me that, just to give a frame for this, in 18 years we have spent a lot of time defeating terrorists, but terrorism has increased. We've targeted extremists, but extremism has grown. We've overthrown governments, but governance has not been improved. We've won battles, but certainly not won the peace. And so how do we create a way to do that? How do we reduce personal and financial costs? It's been $6 trillion, 10,000 Americans dead, 50,000 Americans wounded, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi and Afghans who have been killed. How do we protect the country? How do we create a more sustainable and successful strategy? How do we prevent extremism from taking root? How do we defeat not only today's terrorists, but tomorrow's terrorists?
I got an idea for you. How about you stay home?
Right. How about you shut down your institute?
Yeah, just shut the hell up. That's what you should do. Shut down your think tank, go home, and find another line of work. You've done enough.
That video, that program, that made my head spin around on my neck, I swear. Because he's talked about all of these failures. Everything they've done has been a failure. But now they're going to come up with a new plan to do their failures better.
Yeah. Well, you know, when your failures fail, you got to. Their successes are all failures. They succeed at failing. This is what they do.
They have no successes at all. Period. End of story. But they are continuing on, and just. For anybody who doesn't know who the U.S. Institute of Peace is, they are one of those very connected, very important private sector.
It was established by Congress, wasn't it? I believe it was.
Yes.
It's funded by Congress.
Yes, I'm sure it is. And so they are not just one of, like some university think tank. They are a very important think tank, connected. That's why Madeleine Albright was there. That's why all of those very important people were there at that conference. Mm-hmm. So it can't be dismissed. They are key people in the shift to democracy.
Yeah, democracy.
They are the democracy people. And with democracy comes global governance.
Yeah, democracy, except that their brand of democracy means you don't really have a say in anything. Oh, you might go and vote, but, increasingly, any accountability is being removed from the people.
Well, you can go talk to your local NGO that handles that particular subject. Because that's, in a global governing system, you're so far down on the totem pole you don't even count.
Yeah.
So
on the panel was a lady by the name of Lancy Lindborg. I guess she's the head of that whole U.S. Institute of Peace operation. And she's commenting on why U.S. aid, the Agency for International Development, has not been more successful.
You know, U.S. aid was a global leader in establishing democracy as a part of a development agenda almost 30 years ago. The problem has been, A, it has never had rich amounts of funding, and two is aid sometimes gets leery of jumping into situations that seem political.
Okay, hold on right there. That was a little bit too much for me. They're reluctant at jumping into situations that are more political. Are you kidding me? When has the State Department, which is what USAID is, when have they ever? Everything they do is political. When have they ever avoided any kind of political situation? Am I missing something here?
It's like that whole program puts you in the twilight zone. When you listen to what they're saying and you know what they've done over the years, and it just, you know, talk about cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, I don't. Unless she means that we don't spend a lot of time studying the politics of some foreign country. Now that I could believe. We go in with our ideas and blah blah blah, and to heck with it. I don't know. I'm just baffled by this statement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was thinking about that, and of course, that has to do with global systems design. You can't. What they did is basically, this is the way that you can envision it. They just look at the world and they see pods of people. There are no borders. There are no nation states. There are just pods of people. And there are some leaders of the pods, but just, you know, around the world, it's all the same, just, you know, a pod of people here and a pod of people there. And they look for the common elements among the pods, and that would, of course, be education and health care, global transportation, and, of course, the reason why they need the telecommunications system begins with world customs organizations so that they can have the at each of the transportation hubs they can have the telecommunications system that is the fusion center for all the other systems. And that's their global strategy. Mm-hmm. And so because they are not looking at countries as countries and nationalities and cultures and history, they are just looking at pods.
Yeah, people
pods. Of course their plan is a disaster. Obviously it would be a disaster for anybody who had half a brain.
Yeah.
Or half a heart, I should say. Because it's not that they're stupid people, it's that they are psychopaths, I believe.
We should open the show every week with, "Hello, fellow people pods."
Yep. Okay, yep. We are just part of the pod.
Part of the pod. And with that, we continue with the audio.
And a lot of times it's the politics that need to be understood in order to get the democracy and governance right. Mm-hmm. The civil society movements of people, these are some of the ways that the politics gets addressed, particularly in more repressive societies. And the ability to support that, I mean, I have gone in and out of Iraq for a decade and a half. And one of the best investments we've made there has been the development of civil society. Such that earlier this year you saw people in the streets demonstrating not for their sectarian or religious issues, but for more accountable non-sectarian government.
Okay, so civil society, Vicky, promoting building up civil society. And
that's what George Soros does, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we got a little taste of the civil society when we had all these protesters in the streets. You know, like the one last week.
We begin with breaking news and a very different scene in Iraq. Violent anti-American protesters are attacking the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad this morning. Guards reportedly have responded with tear gas and stun grenades.
Yeah, there's a little taste of civil society for you.
Well, they aren't giving people a government that is responsive to them. They're implementing global governance with the idea that people will take their complaints to the NGOs. Okay, now, in a report that was printed in 2004 from the World Economic Forum, they give this definition of civil society. They say, civil society, that amorphous third sector of human associations, and it says third sector, third way, the means to, I wrote this. Okay, third sector, third way, the means to transition from nation-state government to global governance. Corporate self-governance, privatization of government functions to have a market-based government with the global initiatives for the global commons being healthcare, education, counterterrorism, etc. So I think third way is really the third sector civil society as they define it, not as you and I would define it.
Well, my understanding of civil society has been all these. It's all of the agencies or organizations and stuff, like the NGOs. But it's all of the different groups that make up a society. Would I be wrong in that definition? I know that's kind of vague.
No, I would call civil society the polite society of the well-to-do who all attend cocktail parties and dinners and events. They plan events together, charity events.
It's the stakeholders, Vicky.
Yes,
it's the people that they're always referring to as stakeholders.
That's who civil society is. We are not civil society.
No, we're just a bunch of bums. We're people pods.
we're the pod people. So,
okay. So now that we've established that, I'm looking for my.
You have to know your place in the world.
That's right. Get in your place. All right. So anyway, continue. Now, Madeleine Albright was asked about Russia and China. I think this is the right order.
There are actors out there who are trying to thwart some of those efforts. The Trump administration has mostly gotten credit for this part of their national security strategy, which is calling China a rival, a threat. Some of the officials here have used, but certainly the return of the idea that there is great power competition, particularly China, is a long-term threat to the United States. When you look out at the promotion of democracy, what we need to be doing, how much are China and Russia doing to try and thwart that, and how do we answer them?
Well, I do think that they both, in their own way, are trying to have their influence, which undercuts us, but it also, in terms of the belief that is behind it. I think that the Chinese, maybe we have not paid enough attention to the economic part of building new societies. They have only paid attention to that. And through their Belt and Road projects, they are really, in many ways, trying to buy up or I've been saying the Chinese must be getting very fat because the belt is getting larger and larger. And they are everywhere. And what they do is go in and say that they will provide some project that theoretically is good for the country. And for instance,
okay. First of all, I want to stop there regarding the fat and the belt getting larger. Compare. Now, I'm not trying to diminish the threat of China. I do think they are a threat, but we have to also keep in mind. Take a look at how many military bases the United States has versus China around the world, or for that matter, Russia or any other country. Just pick the country. I mean, it's overwhelming the number of military bases we have. So who's the ones that are really the fat ones?
Yeah, well, you remember when Dan said that he thinks that the secret service agencies of governments all work together, and they're all working against the nation state.
At the top.
Well, I believe that's true.
Yeah.
I think the FSB is the reconstitution of the KGB, and I think that they are working with the CIA and MI6 and whatever China's version of that is. And the reason why I think that is because it was Hutchison Whampoa that was a Hong Kong firm connected with the Communist Chinese military.
Okay. We got to take the break in 10 seconds. Keep your thoughts in place. We'll come right back to that, okay?
Okay.
Remember what you're saying. We'll be back, folks. This is Govern America.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
And we're back. This is Govern America. Vicky Davis is here. I'm Darren Weeks. We're here every Saturday. We hope you'll spread the word about the broadcast. The website for the show is governamerica.com. That's governamerica.com. You can get past archives of past shows. You can also subscribe to the podcast. And there's a number of different platforms you can also subscribe to the podcast from. But governamerica.com. Also a lot of news and information up there as well. And Vicky Davis is here as well. Her websites. I'll go ahead and let you give everything out, Vicky.
Okay, it's thetechnocratictyranny.com. And my email address is on the website, as is the name of my older website, channelingreality.com.
All right.
So thetechnocratictyranny.com.
And before the break, you were in the middle of a sentence, I think, and I had to rudely interrupt you. Go ahead, and if you hopefully remember what you were saying.
Oh yeah, where I was going with that was that the Trans-Texas Corridor was part of the Belt and Road project, and Lockheed was involved in developing the systems. I think originally over in Singapore, and they were bringing it to the United States via NASCO. The North American something or other, I forget what the acronym was, NASCO, but they were using a front company with an Indian CEO, Indian people from India, called Savvy Tech, S-A-V-I, Tech. So the Chinese Belt and Road project is really not the Chinese Belt and Road project. It was a global project, and the Chinese are out there doing it, but so is the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything they do is worldwide, and the whole point is it's the world order that they're building. These are This is piece by pieces. I mean,
everything they accuse other countries of doing, we're doing too.
Yeah,
It's just that most people don't look out at the other countries and see what's being done and why they're doing it and how it connects at the global level. What is the global strategic plan? Because you have to bring your analysis up to the global level to see that the United States is doing it and China is doing it and Saudi Arabia, of course, is funding a lot of it. Dubai was going to take over ports on our East Coast. Mm-hmm. Well, the whole global Belt and Road project is going port to port to port. So in order for Dubai to participate in the port-to-port system, they were going to control the East Coast port.
Yeah.
But there was Stephen King. He was a congressman from New York. And he was really the one that was most vocal opposing Dubai Ports World from getting control of those ports. But, most of the other congressmen were just kind of quiet, laying back.
Yeah.
Not wanting to comment on that, so.
Yeah, so we were playing audio. I'm sorry, I thought you were. Did you have something else?
No, I'm done. Anything else I'd have to say is just ranting.
Well, yeah, that's okay. I like your rants. But the audio from Madeleine Albright, she again, she was commenting on Russia and China. We'll get back to that.
One, I remember being in Kenya where there was some discussion about building a road, and was it going to harm the Serengeti? And the American contractors were very conscious of that. The Chinese said, "Where do you want it?" And so they've done it in a variety of different places, and they actually are not very patient either. But their initial aspect, their entry point, is something that is very attractive, and they don't care what the government is. The Russians have a different goal. They're trying to undermine anything that we do, and are trying to separate us from our allies and our various ways, and they don't have any money internally, so they're not going to be doing that, but they are trying to resurge as a major power, and so they are saying that what the Americans are doing is something that is contrary to what the country wants. It's very interesting to see them kind of resurge in the Middle East and in Egypt specifically, with when you were talking about the Arab Spring. So they are out there, and it would be better if we all worked together, but that is not how it works. But the Chinese are the ones, I think, that are the strongest in terms of trying to separate us from trying to develop the kinds of issues that we're talking about, because they do take longer. It's easier to build a road than create the various institutions that we're talking about.
Yeah, we spend so much time trying to build institutions, don't we? You know.
Yeah, they think that with NED and the
National Endowment for Democracy.
Yeah, the 4 institutes of NED, they can just, turnkey government and society in a box, just drop it right in every country. Once they get the telecommunication system in, they can just drop this governing system right into place, and all the pod people will live happily ever after.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're ever going to let the pod people live in peace anyway. And again, I mentioned piece by pieces earlier, folks. When we define peace as in their terms, it's not the peace like you would think of peace. Peace is you can't fire back. Basically, they can do anything they want to you, and you have no ability to defend you. You have the right to do exactly as you're told.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because
Darren.
that's what the technocratic society that's being built is designed to do. That's exactly why you have all of the surveillance. It's to enforce the police state that they're going to be building around you. The social credit score system, a lot of this stuff, you're right, when you talk about there's a lot more correlation between East and West, because I really think that China is really the test tube, if you will, the beaker, the laboratory would be a better word, for a lot of the things that they want to implement here. Like the social credit scoring system. That's being tested out in China because there would be a lot more pushback here in the United States. The genetically modifying of human genes, making them into hybrid and part animal and part human, and all the grotesque freak creatures that might come out of this, all of that's being done in China because they can get away with it in China. They can push ethics further in China. But to think that that's not coming here, we got a president right now who is pushing for the Space Force. The Space Force, Vicky? How it's almost like Trump found a new toy when it comes to the Space Force.
Well, the Space Force, for, quote, cybersecurity, that they will be the controllers of the global systems. And so, they first started talking about that quite a long time ago, only it was going to be an American military thing, but I don't believe it's going to be that. I think it will be a UN system, apparently.
Well, it'll be... Yes, I don't think it'll be an entirely American. Really, right now we've got an international space station up there. Mm-hmm. And ironically, we're cooperating with the Russians. We've been NASA hasn't been launching rockets. We haven't had our own space program in a while, and now they're trying to have a commercial one. So you got nut jobs like that CEO of Tesla, deeply involved in that. But the reason I brought up the Space Force is, why do we need a Space Force? Oh, well, other countries are doing it. So why? We got to make sure that we're right up to their level, because they're going to do it, without us. And so what do we got to look forward to with a Space Force? There's an international treaty right now, I believe, that's preventing the weaponization of space. But do you think that that's going to last? Do you think we're going to honor that? I mean, I don't think so.
More to the point, the other nations won't necessarily honor it. There's no reason to.
Well, when you consider that the United States does a lot of things that they agree to, in fact, a lot of the initiatives that they put forward, under the guise of, hey, we got to, first we do it, and then we turn around and try to get other people to disarm them because we did it, and, we're going to destroy the world if we continue down this path. Well, wait a minute. You were the ones that went down the path to begin with, and now you're going to turn around and say that we got to have a treaty to prevent everybody from doing it because we set the ball in motion.
Yeah. Funny how that works, isn't it?
Oh, man. Anyway, folks, I would love to be able, I love my country. And it may sound like on this broadcast that, I'm a part of what the right calls blame America first. But I think, again, if you're going to face the truth, you got to look at reality and realize that despite the fact that I love my country, I love all the people in our country, the government has been rotten to the core. I mean, it's rot with corruption, it's rot with deceit, it's rot with a lot of things. And I think the constitutional system is good, but we're not really using the constitutional system anymore.
No, they've destroyed it with international agreements. They've absolutely destroyed the Constitution with international treaties.
Yeah, I mean they'll adhere to it on certain, unimportant things, but they're looking for little ways to get around it every step of the way. All right, let's get back to the discussion, because it's such a great discussion about strengthening fragile countries, and no discussion, Vicky, would be complete when you're talking about strengthening fragile countries without promoting the corporatocracy.
Well, Secretary Albright talked about public-private partnership, and I grabbed onto that very early as ambassador, certainly, in part because, as people may remember, we had comprehensive sanctions. So companies could not invest, they couldn't trade for many years. And my first day as ambassador was basically right after the easing of investment sanctions. So I had in my residence all the companies who were interested, and I challenged them. I said, look, we are now counting on you now to bring those values with you in what you do. Understanding the Chinese do it differently. The Chinese bring their values or lack of values, whatever their values are. But the values that we bring of openness, of transparency, I challenge them. You must demonstrate that you are operating in a different way. And if you do, you will get the full support of the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. government in that effort. Because, I used to say in Burma that, look, when we come, and I challenge my companies to do this, and they would, we really invest. We're there to invest in every sense of the term. We'll invest in local communities, we'll train people, we'll give back, and we're investing in the people. We really care about the success of that country, because the success of that country is in our interest. Other countries extract. Others are there because they think we want something, we want their resources, we want to maybe export our workers, we have excess capacity, whatever it is. There's a different mindset.
Yeah, we don't extract anything, right?
The U.S. must maintain...
The only difference is that we have the U.S. State Department to act as the corporate public relations department to sell the idea, but the State Department is helping the corporations to go in and extract.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way this whole game works.
Yeah. Let me go back.
So there is certainly an advantage to our work. If we're smart about this century, I would say, being really the fundamental is not about China per se. It's about what are the values, what are the norms, what are the rules that will govern the international system in the 21st century. We had a certain rule base and norm base that followed World War II, and that we were the head of the free world and we were the hyperpower for a while. But that's now in challenge. And who is going to shape that? How will it be shaped? And we need every resource we can, and the private sector is a very strong resource, very powerful internationally. They could be an ally in this. We should challenge them to be an ally in this. I think we should engage them more actively, and that includes the tech sector, which is a whole other realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a whole other. That's right.
And he was interrupted at that
the tech sector that really is the power behind the whole thing, because obviously they're going to control the world. They're making all the money.
Yeah. This is what Patrick Wood always talks about.
Just all of the global companies that are tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where it's at, because, and this is what Patrick Wood's always talking about, technocracy.news, and his book is Technocracy Rising. I think he's got another one out, too, and I'll have to get a copy of that and maybe have him back on the show again to talk about it, because it's been a while. But I noticed in this hearing they made reference repeatedly to something called the Global Fragility Act. And this is really, I think, monumental. Now, I'll play the audio and then we'll comment on it, because I looked up the Global Fragility Act, and it's quite striking what's in this bill.
First is, we see that the more fragile a state is, the more vulnerable it is to the influence or the predations of regional or great powers who want to interfere. And particularly we're seeing that with China and in select cases Russia. So fragility matters as we look at creating a world that is more committed to prosperous democracies. Secondly, I worry a lot that even as our national security strategies focus more and more on great power competition, and there's good reason for doing that, but these issues of fragility are not gone. And at some peril, do we risk shifting all of the attention away from addressing the kind of state fragility issues that lead to violent conflict, violent extremism, extreme poverty, and significant migration? And thirdly, that to do all of this will require the kind of resources and longevity that we are seeing enshrined in the Global Fragility Act. So I take great heart that we now have the past, thanks to the effort of a lot of people in this room, the Global Fragility Act that is a binding commitment to create these long-term strategies with 10 pilots out of the box that we need to look at. Because we really risk losing focus right at the time that we've got these lessons and these ideas, these recommendations, some high-level validation that this is important. We could easily wander off field because we're distracted. So, I hope that we can really take the Global Fragility Act and use that as a momentum for putting these ideas into action. And it will be hard because bureaucracy is a hard thing to move, and that's what we've got to deal with.
Okay, now
do you remember who Sam Kinison was? He was that comedian that would yell, talking about Ethiopia. Food doesn't grow there because it's a desert. That's what these people make me want to do. They're creating this whole global destabilization, and now they want this Fragility Act to so that they can address the instability, which they never can because they simply don't understand human society.
Well, they're the ones that are creating this instabilities,
right? Because they're psychopaths. All right. Okay.
Yeah, but what do we know? We're just pod people, Vicky.
I know.
But this Global Fragility Act, this is S727 in Congress right now, and
there's about 3 versions of it. There's a big version of it. I think the big version where they lined it all out. I think that's the real version.
Well, I know that. And they completely rewrote the bill. You're right. They got the whole bill scratched out, strike through is what they call it. and then they got the other one down there. I look at this as a deep state power grab.
Yes, I agree with you totally on that.
You know how we played audio from Attorney General Bill Barr, and he was talking about his concerns that the power is being shifted away. More and more power is being shifted away from the president. Now, that sounds counterintuitive to people like us who have been complaining about, executive power grabs and, how the president, different presidents, have been trying to do certain things that are beyond their constitutional authority. But there's also...
Well, when he said that, I was thinking that Congress transferred a lot of their power to the president with this whole trade agenda.
Yeah.
And now Barr is saying that power is being transferred away from the president. Of course it is, because they built this global governing system and they funded it and they sent out the military to do the logistics on it, and they send out USAID.
Well, what I think they're doing, yes, and you got all these bureaucratic agencies that are answerable to the executive branch, but they also are answerable to Congress. What it looks like to me is that they're turning the President of the United States into an administrator. Because if you recall in that report, or that speech that Barr gave, he talked about how they're trying to give the president all this busy work, putting forth all these reports to Congress in answer to all these different things that they've got him, or and someday maybe her, involved in with bureaucratic agencies and projects and things that they're mandating. This Global Fragility Act. What it looks like, let me just here's the summary of the bill. This bill directs the president to devise and implement a plan to combat global fragility. The bill also establishes funds to support such endeavors. Oh, baby. The president shall report to Congress and implement a 10-year global fragility strategy. And we're talking about the domain of the president, folks.
And we're also talking about doing this for other countries. Don't
yes,
lose
that's
sight
what the
of
whole
that.
point is. Foreign policy, though, is the domain of the presidency. What you have here is a shifting, if they get their way, of foreign strategy or foreign policy away from the president, who has traditionally set foreign policy, to Congress? Well, no, it's to a bureaucratic entity, as we'll see here in a minute. The president shall report to Congress, again, more paperwork, more administrative stuff that they have to produce, and implement a 10-year global fragility strategy to 1, help stabilize conflict-affected areas, 2, address global fragility, and 3, increase U.S. capacity to be a leader in international efforts to prevent extremism and violent conflict. The strategy shall 1, focus on the long-term causes of fragility and violence, 2, include specific objectives and approaches to reduce such causes, and 3, contain a selection of priority countries and regions based on various factors, including U.S. national security interest and clearly defined indicators of the levels of violence or fragility in a country or region. The President shall report to Congress and implement action plans for the priority countries and regions. And it establishes a fund. The new fund shall support stabilization of conflict-affected areas, liberated from or at risk from various terrorist organizations, such as the Islamic State, which is almost defeated completely anyway, but they mention it in here. The bill also establishes the Complex Crises Fund to prevent or respond to emerging and unforeseen events overseas. So that's the summary. Now, as I said, as we said, the bill's been completely rewritten, and let me look at Section 3, Statement of Policy. It is the policy of the United States to ensure that all relevant federal departments and agencies coordinate to achieve coherent. Now, here's the thing, folks. Even just seeing based upon what I just read, okay, you've got Congress dictating what the president is going to do. You know, is there something wrong with it? That in and of itself is a little weird, because the branches of government are separate and equal under the Constitution. But the Congress is saying, you, President, will do this. Okay? So they say this is the policy of the United States to ensure that all relevant federal documents and agencies coordinate to achieve coherent long-term goals for programs designed to stabilize conflict-affected areas and prevent violence and fragility globally, including when implementing the Global Fragility Strategy established pursuant to Section 4. And we'll get to that here in a moment. I'm going to have to take a break. We're up against the clock, unfortunately. So let's go ahead and take the break, and we'll be back in a moment. This is as I see this is a deep state power grab, a shifting of power from the president to some kind of bureaucracy that's going to be defined by Congress. Foreign policy, and as we see, it's not just any bureaucracy, it's a bureaucracy of the United States State Department. So the deep state just got deeper. We'll be back.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 11th of January, 2020, as we get right back here into the show. We're talking about the Global Fragility Act. This is an act, SB 727, that's currently in Congress right now. And Vicky, I want to share a little from Section 4. I want to skip Section 3 and go directly to Section 4 so that we can try to cut to the chase here. Because this puts the State Department in charge of these areas that they're trying to define here. The President, this is what they say in the bill, the President, in coordination with the Secretary of State, the Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, the Secretary of Defense, and the heads of other relevant federal departments and agencies shall establish a comprehensive integrated 10-year strategy to be referred to as the Global Fragility Strategy to contribute to the stabilization of conflict-affected areas, address global fragility, and strengthen the capacity of the United States to be an effective leader of international efforts to prevent extremism and violent conflict. The strategy shall focus, now, first of all, here you have the President playing a part in forming a strategy. But the President, if the President agrees to be bound by this bill, let's just, Again, separate but equal powers, the branches of government. But the president, they would have it that the president would play a part, but would have to form the policy, which is longer than a term of the president. Let's just point that out, too. We're talking about a 10-year plan here. So supposedly a new president could come in, and the foreign policy is already there. So you know how the deep state really is defined as the permanent state. It's there. It's in place. So when a president comes, generally you have the foreign policy of that president set by that president. This would remove that. This would be a policy that's in place, a strategy that's in place, set by a president who wasn't in power at the time. You see what I'm getting at here? This is a shift. If this gets implemented, this is a shift in who sets foreign policy. And later on in the bill, go ahead.
But this is their modus operandi. They've been doing this for a long time. Okay, now you notice that there are like 3 different versions of that bill out there. One of them is very detailed, and then there's another one that is very general. And I'll bet that what happens is that they will pass the one that is very general, and they'll pass it like a resolution, which doesn't really mean a lot. But then over the next 5 or 6 or 10 years or so, that they will be implementing it piece by piece into law. Okay, but now what the president does, he's in charge of foreign policy, but his power over the domestic agencies is simply to ensure that the law is followed. Mm-hmm. And so if Congress enacts legislation that is against the interests of our country, which I believe this international policy is absolutely against the interests of our country within the borders of the United States, he's still responsible for the agencies are responsible for implementing it, and he's kind of powerless over the agencies to stop them. The best he can do is to appoint someone who might go shake up the agency, but the laws are still out there on the books. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem that we have in our government, is this bifurcation. You've got these globalists who have been working on this international agenda, and Trump is going along with it despite his campaign promises. Mm-hmm. He renegotiated the USMCA. He's negotiating an agreement with China. So the trade agenda, that's not about trade. It's not about the economy of our country. It's about the global system of commercial law for standardization, for trade facilitation across borders, for the environment, and they apparently added labor things in for the USMCA. But it's not about improving the economy of our country, because if they were going to improve the economy of our country, they would shut the borders.
Yeah.
And we would produce everything we can possibly produce in our own country. Yeah,
amen. I can't argue with a thing you said there. The thing is as I look at this bill, Vicky, and of course a lot of bills have been introduced and haven't passed. I think this one's going to pass based upon the sponsors that are there. But this is the deep state grabbing more power. They want to be able to set everything directly by the State Department. That's really the den of thieves, the den of spooks. That's where a lot of the horrible stuff worldwide comes from, the State Department. All manner of evil. And they want to be able to... Okay, let me just read a little bit more of this Section 4. The strategy shall focus on addressing long-term causes of fragility and violence, and shall, 1, consider the causes of fragility and violence in both local and national levels. The external actors that reinforce and exploit such conditions, and successful prevention strategies and their key features. 2. Include specific objectives and multi-sectoral approaches to reduce fragility and causes of violence, including those that strengthen state-society relations, curb extremist ideology, and make society less vulnerable, blah, blah, blah. 3. Encourage and empower local and national actors to address the concerns of their citizens, including those in vulnerable communities, build community resilience, violence, and extremism. 4. Address the long-term underlying causes of fragility and violence through participatory, locally led programs empowering marginalized groups such as youth and women, inclusive dialogues and conflict resolution processes, justice sector reform, good governance across all sectors, community policing, and civilian security, whatever that is, civilian security, and inclusive and accountable service delivery. 5. Describe approaches that ensure national leadership where appropriate and participatory engagement by civil society, there's the term again, and local partners in the design, implementation, and monitoring of programs. 6. Assign roles for relevant federal agencies and departments to avoid duplication of efforts while ensuring that, now listen to this, while ensuring that A, the Department of State is responsible for leading the strategy. Not the president. Establishing United States foreign policy, advancing diplomatic and potential efforts, and guiding security assistance and related civilian security efforts. The State Department is responsible. This is a power grab. B, U.S. aid is responsible, again, ensuring that B, U.S. aid is responsible for overseeing prevention programs and is the lead implementing agency for development, humanitarian, and related non-security programs policies. And they go on from there. Activities undertaken or supported by the Department of Defense in relation to the Global Fragility Strategy are established through joint formulation and with the concurrence of the Secretary of State. And D, other relevant federal departments and agencies support the activities of the Department of State and U.S. aid as appropriate with the concurrence of the Secretary of State and the Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development. This is all about, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what I can read. This is nothing short than, in my opinion, of a shift in power from the duly elected President of the United States to the deep state establishment spooks behind the scenes, the permanent state. They want it all, Vicky. They don't want. See, here's the thing: if they go to the president and they want the president to take some kind of action, and there's actually provisions under here for the military too.
Yeah. Well, the military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is on the National Security Council of the UN, along with the UN ambassador.
Yeah, so, you can't have fragility without control of militaries, right? Peacekeeping forces, And if they go to the president, just like Trump, let's go back to him for a minute.
You just said something there. You talked about privatized security, right? Well, that would be the UN. That's why the UN must be gearing up, right, for peacekeeping. Yeah, if they pass that piece of legislation.
Yeah, well, they talk about peacekeeping. There's peacekeeping everywhere that United Nations goes. It's all about peacekeeping, but what it really is about waging war. But in true Orwellian fashion, war is peace. Freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. But in this, they're talking about fragility and extremism. You can't control all that without controlling militaries. And what I was about to say a moment ago was that if they go to the president and they want the president to take some kind of action, and the president says, no, you know what, I don't think that that's prudent. I don't think that that's something we should be doing. Well, then they have a problem because they can't get their agenda done. Here, if if you put the State Department directly in charge, now all of a sudden, you don't have to worry about going through the president. You don't have to worry about going through anybody else. You have the State Department and the United States Agency for International Development, which is an arm of the State Department, in charge of controlling what happens regarding U.S. foreign policy. This is a cataclysmic shift, a monumental shift, if this bill passes.
Yeah, I'm going to have to study that. You're right. This is really, really bad. But I can't think on the fly about it.
I was reading this last night. I started reading this last night because they kept pushing this bill. Okay, and part of the reason is there's like something like $300 million that they're, in fact, $300 million. It's really $330 million because there's an extra $30 million I think that they appropriated in here. So part of the, there's money involved, but even bigger, it's the power.
Wait, you should explain that to people. It doesn't sound like large amounts of money, but there's money that's allocated that will be allocated subsequently, and then they go to corporations that are their quote partners in this whole global system because they are selling out nation states. They are trying to dissolve nation states. And they are trying to govern the world as separate systems. Like the multinational corporations are self-governing. They are part of the global system authorized and enabled by the international trade agreements. Okay, so these NGOs get money from the corporations because they are trying to ease government out of the business of management of people and society.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to find that piece. I wish I had the time to go through and print this out and highlight portions of this thing. Maybe I'll have to do this for subsequent broadcasts because we're probably going to have to revisit this.
Oh, no doubt, because I was watching the next program on that included Mark Green, who is the president of USAID. There are a lot of clips from that you need to get that we need to talk about.
Yeah, you sent me a lot of stuff, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to a lot of it, but I will.
Well, I sent it to you at like 5 a.m., so you didn't get to it? What's wrong with you?
Well, some of it you sent to me earlier, like yesterday or something, but it's incredible how much, gosh, again, I've been lost in the Middle East. I got another, let's see, I'm trying to figure out what this is that I've got. Well, I'll tell you what, let's play it and figure it out.
We'll often have people like me accuse the U.S. government of pursuing short-term counterterrorism gains at the expense of long-term stability. Secretary Albright, one of the fun things about being a journalist is I don't have to have solutions. I can only point out criticisms here.
This is the PBS Snooze Hour guy, and he's addressing Madeleine Albright. This is earlier. We're jumping backwards now in this meeting because this illustrates... she's referencing this bill. I think I know what this clip is. For some reason, I didn't document it very well. But she referenced, just to illustrate part of the reason why, aside from reading the bill itself, why I think this is what they're doing, is she made a reference to, having Article 1. And she's talking about the Constitution. It's time for Article 1. All legislative powers shall be vested in the Congress. Article 1 deals with the responsibilities and the roles of Congress. So she's talking about, in the context of foreign policy, having Article 1 come into play. In other words, Congress will take the role. And she makes some kind of reference here. You're going to hear her say something like, I wouldn't have been in favor of this when I was in the executive branch. But, So this is what the clip is.
And it seems to me what Nancy just called political patience, what I would call long-term patience or long-term strategy or long-term notion that things like development, education in places like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sudan take not only one presidential cycle, two presidential cycles, but decades. Is it really possible for the U.S. government to have a strategy that looks out beyond one presidential cycle?
Okay, now, I'm going to stop it right there. Did you hear what he just said? This is setting the whole thing up. Is it possible to have a consistent foreign policy that transcends presidential administrations? See, that's
working on the society and the country of Pakistan. Okay, not our country. Not this just really upsets me.
Yeah, this is what they're doing. They're talking about taking foreign policy and transcending it, setting it in place, and having it be something where the next president comes in and they're just a little puppet stooge administrator who administrates the preset, preordained plan. Because it's a 10-year plan, and who knows, maybe later on it'll be a 20-year plan. Who knows? But the point is,
these people
the plan will be in place.
Policy parasites, and they are the ones that have captured our government, and they've been disintegrating it so that they could have their global governing system under the United Nations.
This is a coup d'etat, folks. This is a coup d'etat. Listen. This is a greater coup d'etat than what's been done against Trump as far as the impeachment thing. Trump's going to come. Trump's going to go. The next president will come and go. I've called presidents often. I've called them straw men. Because they are. They go. They burn one straw man. Straw man goes up in flames. Here comes a new straw man. But the bottom line is these people, the ones you're hearing talking right now, these deep state goons. These people are the ones that stay. These people are the ones that don't go away. Now they may not be in in the public sector right now. Madeleine Albright.
Well, that's where their power is now, because the Congress has transferred the power to those people to do all these things.
Absolutely.
USAID is a government created agency. It was created by John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was created for this very purpose, economic development of foreign countries.
Yeah.
So you wonder why, our country has had fabulous resources. We should be the richest country in the world. We're not, because they've extracted the wealth of this country, a lot from the middle class of this country, but also our
natural resources.
Use that money for economic development for foreign countries.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's part of the global system of governance.
Okay, getting back to the audio.
For the U.S. government to have a strategy that looks out beyond one presidential cycle?
I think difficult, frankly, because an awful lot of the campaigning and the carrying out of policy is in opposition to what the previous people did. It seems to be a regular act. And so I think that what has to happen is, since we are a democracy, and democracy is based on, as I said, not a spectator sport, of people participating, and they are open to pressure from the public, that I think it is worth very much thinking about what our role is for the people that are not in the government. And I think also, in a strange way, Congress, senators are there longer than a cycle. And I think that I have been saying at the moment, for any number of reasons, that this is Article 1 time, which is the first article of the Constitution, is about the power of Congress. I might not have said that when I was in the executive branch. But I do think that part of the thing that has to happen, it has to be part of our DNA, that we understand that this is going to take time, and that it really requires a group of people from a variety of different parts of our society to keep saying this is going to take time. And also, I think for a little humility to say it's taken us time. And so it is difficult. I am very worried generally about the kind of 4-year cycle of foreign policy, even when it's by the same party, because I do think that there's kind of a sense we have to do something totally different, whereas I think picking up a project is a good idea. The other part that I have to say, and I certainly was true when we were in office, is when you do something, people want to just check it off and say, okay, we've now done Bosnia, or whatever, and it all takes much more time, and we are not a patient people. And so I think there has to be, and Nancy, I think this is something we have to work on with the Fragility Act, is to actually report on certain deadlines that have been met or certain accomplishments, so that it doesn't just seem that it's sunk into the bureaucracy and that we're not keeping track, and set up some kind of a reporting system to the American people on this. But patience is not our best suit.
Yeah, here you go, slaves. Here's what we've done in your name with your money. You have nothing to say about it, but hey, here's your report. Take it.
Yeah. That
except for the redacted
me.
stuff.
I heard this is a little bit off topic, but this is important. I want to get this on the record.
Sure.
I watched a part of a hearing about the census, and I believe I heard them say that this will be the first time ever that they will do a totally online census.
Wow.
And if that is correct, then everybody in this country should be jumping up and down and saying, you will not do that, because that is guaranteed fraud. Guaranteed. Because how many people are on the internet versus how many people are not? And I'm sure there are a lot more that are not on the internet than are on the internet. It's all the young people that are on the internet, but there's a lot of...
Well, there's a lot of people that... There's some people that are not on the internet. I'd say probably more elderly than anybody, and maybe a lot of people who are impoverished, certainly. But I'm more concerned. You're right. It'll be fraud. It's just like it's like online
voting.
voting.
Use that information to reapportion the Congress.
Yes, but it's like
not
online
just a
voting.
matter of they're going to do this and it's going to be a mess. It is more important than that.
Well, are they going to get the debold machines out there? I mean, who's the website? Who's the website going to be made by?
ES&S, that voting company bought Diebold.
Well, whatever. You know what I'm saying. Yeah. The point stands. I mean,
Pandora's
black box
too is that I think the census thing is going to be used as one step closer to direct democracy, which is a subject that they were also talking about with the election system in another recent hearing. You know what? The Congress goes months and months and they don't do a thing. Nothing going on in terms of legislation. But it's like we're getting the bum's rush. All of this stuff they're talking about, this foreign policy and the census and the election system and so many things that it's really almost impossible to keep up with it.
Yeah.
And I believe that's absolutely intentional because we have a bunch of crooks and criminals and
thieves, rapists.
Yeah, that too. Oh
man, it's crazy. We got a caller on the line, and I'm looking at the clock, and it's almost break time again. I'll tell you what, we'll take the call. We'll hold the caller over. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hey guys, this is Art.
Hi.
Hi, Art.
Kind of curious on the USMCA. You kind of make me think of a Village People song, USMCA. But seriously, though. You know what I'm talking about, the Village People song.
Oh, yeah.
I love that song.
So every time I hear that USMCA, I keep thinking about, we need to write a spoof song on this. But I'm kind of curious. I was listening to Darren Shof on RBN this morning.
Uh-huh.
The caller from here in Georgia, I forget her name, she called in and she was talking about this, and she mentioned something that supposedly is in there, and I don't really care much for the John Birch Society, so I didn't bother to go look at their thing.
Okay,
I figured,
Art, you're going to have to hold on just a minute. Keep your thoughts in place, and we'll come back to you right after the break, okay? Folks, this is Govern America. Vicky Davis, Darren Weeks. Final half hour of the show this week is straight ahead. Don't go away.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're in the home stretch of the broadcast right now, final half hour here, as we head for the sunset on this January 11th, 2020 edition of the broadcast. Art is in, I think he said Georgia, and he's on the line. Go ahead, Art, with your points.
Yeah, so anyway, this woman called in, and she was talking about the USMCA, and said that there was a section in there that actually talked about the whole gender identity thing.
Yes.
You know, I was born with a penis, but I identify as a woman.
Yes, there are social justice warrior stuff implemented in the USMCA. In fact, I think we talked about that briefly on the show we did, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, they've incorporated a lot of stuff like that. What's that, Vicky?
The United States has used human rights. In our country, they've used human rights to change our laws, change our culture. I mean, the idea of the LGBTQ, the whole idea of it is counter to our culture, our history and heritage. And, when you see somebody dressed up, a man dressed up like a woman, in times past, we would put them in jail if they tried to get near children.
Let alone a man entering a woman's restroom. I mean,
he would be arrested as a pervert, and he should be arrested as a pervert. I don't care
what anyone
whether
says.
He likes men or women in his private life, but when he's in public and we're sharing this public space, born a man with male parts, does not belong in a woman's restroom.
At one time, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual on Mental Disorders addressed this, but the lobby for in fact, homosexuality was considered a mental illness that was treatable, and people were treated for it. But now we've taken mental illness and we've accelerated it to astronomical rates to the point where now it's even to mention that is you're villainized and demonized.
Right. It's all part of the destabilization of the society and the culture because they are breaking our country.
Yes.
They're breaking our country down and all of the cultural norms and values that most of us share. There's only a tiny percentage of people that the LGBTQ BS affects.
Yeah.
LGBTQ, PB, and J.
Yeah.
But my big problem is, Ben, I've been trying to find a copy of that USMCA, and the only thing I can seem to find is like summaries and breakdown reports, but I can't find a copy of it.
Well, there's a copy, I think, it's on our show notes.
It's also on the U.S. Trade Representative's website, USTR.
There was a week or two ago, and I don't remember exactly which show it was, but it was a week or two ago. It's on the Trade Representative website, and that's where we linked to it. But we did a show on USMCA where we played some clips and stuff, and we talked about it. And in the show notes for that broadcast, we have a direct link to it. But you can find copies. There's in fact one that's actually USMCA. They have the text, I think it's usmca.com is where they have a text of it. But the problem is I didn't link to that one because that's not official as far as I know, and I don't know. It looks like the actual text is there. I don't know how up to date it is because keep in mind the document has been being changed. So I would go directly to the Federal Trade Commission website and get it from there. Or you can get it from
the U.S. Trade Representative, ustr.gov.
Yes. And it's the .gov.
USTR.gov.
Yeah. So it's
STR.
So anyway, Art, I appreciate the call. I thank you. In the interest of time, I want to try to get as much in here as possible, but appreciate you calling in there, brother.
I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. All right. So moving along here, I don't know if you had anything else to say. I wanted to jump to the Brookings Institution real quick for one clip. That clip where the Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy was talking.
Oh, yeah, that's really important. Yeah, let's get to that.
He's talking about the role of our military in the Indo-Pacific region.
The U.S. must maintain overmatch against our adversaries, and the Army is foundational to the Joint Forces' success in the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility. In this era of great power competition, China will emerge as America's strategic threat. Over 60% of the world's GDP flows through the Straits of Malacca, and China is militarizing the global commons. In order to commoditize life for its 1.1 billion people, China is increasingly relying on its Belt and Road Initiative. Having the U.S. Army in the region with modernized weaponry, nestle alongside our counterparts, changes the calculus and creates dilemmas for potential adversaries. Furthermore, having the U.S. Army in the region strengthens America's position to conduct global commerce, build confidence with investors, and compete economically. The Army has traditionally focused its efforts towards Europe, given that Russia is a land-based threat. 7 decades of partnership in Europe have set the conditions for strong militaries and strong partners that are capable of countering threats from abroad. We will continue to provide deterrence and shaping operations in concert with our allies and partners in Europe. While many people think of the Army as primarily having a role in Europe, and we are doing many great things to bolster our capabilities in Europe, the Army is much more than tanks and Bradleys. We serve as the operational, command and control, advise and assist, long-range precision fires and effects, and the logistical backbone of our current and future military operations.
I like how this guy's cadence, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah.
That's practiced.
Yeah.
The U.S. Army, in essence, is engaging in warfare by other means. As we learned during World War II, the adversary's goals and tyranny of geography will require the Army to operate on two fronts, both in Europe and Pacific. At first blush, it is easy to assume based on landmass, the waterways in the Indo-Pacific would be predominantly a sister service endeavor. However, it will be the Army on the ground, partnered with militaries, influencing the people and serving as the ultimate deterrence. Pairing with our allies and partners, continuous presence, and shared equipment will enable military strength to overcome economic strangleholds, promote good global commons, and offer an alternative to the adversary's narrative. People don't live on water, air, or in space. Long before conditions escalate to war, there will be a battle of ideas. This is warfare by other means, and decisions will occur in the heart of the people. We must be present to offer an alternative.
Okay, so he's talking about the reasons why we have to keep our military over there in the Asia-Pacific region. I know you're chomping at the bit.
You bet I am. Yeah, they're trading in their combat boots for pontoons. Now, the movement, I think that what's happening is that they are making the same mistake that Hitler made, which is, of course, that he got spread out all over the place, and then he got defeated because he took too big of a bite, and that's what they're doing. But the reason why they're doing it is because it's the military logistics system that the military has been implementing over in the Middle East. And the military logistics system is the same system, essentially, as the civilian port management systems and the fusion center systems. And, it occurred to me many times over these years, I wonder if the military understands that the system that they're implementing, that came to them by way of General John Saakashvili, I wonder if they understand that same system is the same system that's being implemented on our civilian turf at ports, inland ports, in our interior of the United States. Because that's where I first found it, was in Meridian, Idaho. And I put together the picture of it piece by piece, till I understood what all the systems were, and the convergence of the systems in the fusion center structure. So that's what they're doing, moving the Army, because it's the Army logistics system that the military is using, that is the counterpart to the civilian system.
What I'm thinking about, Vicky, as you're talking, is how much this domestic surveillance program that's going on has to do with, we know that the domestic surveillance, surveillance of the world, this is part of this whole technocratic tyranny, and you mentioned fusion centers, it's all a big part of the overall plan of control. And
absolutely.
I'm sure you've probably heard of these mysterious drones that are flying over Colorado, and I guess it's expanded now to other states, or at least one other state. I don't know if you heard about that or not, but there's a big uproar right now. In fact, let me just go ahead and play. There's a local news outlet that was covering this, or a couple of them. Because there's a big uproar now. These drones come out at 7 o'clock at night, and they're flying in a grid pattern. They're bigger. It's an orchestrated effort. In other words, it's a fleet of drones, evidently, and they systematically are going back and forth in a grid pattern, doing one square and then doing another square, and this is happening at night, clockwork, I guess. Anyway, here. I got a couple of reports. Let me just play this.
There was another squadron of drones spotted flying over northeastern Colorado last night.
This time near Genoa, which is northeast of Lyman. Denver 7's Lance Hernandez is asking questions.
Drones are a topic of conversation in many small northeastern Colorado towns. The sheriff in Lincoln County pinpointing the area where a rancher spotted a squadron last night.
And said he observed anywhere from 5 to 10 drones over about a 25-mile square radius north in our county.
Sightings have also been reported in Phillips, Yuma, and Washington counties.
Honestly, when I first heard these reports, I thought maybe people were taking criminal activity high-tech by stalking out properties.
The drones were apparently spotted flying here in northern Lincoln County, which is home to a giant wind energy farm. Now, none of the local residents out here wanted to talk on camera, but they did tell me they're curious what those drones are all about.
So are residents in Lyman.
Maybe they have a infrared or something on them, because in my business we do solar farms, and they do infrared to see how hot the panels are getting.
The big concern, night flying. FAA rules limit drone flying to daylight hours, a half hour before sunrise to a half hour after sunset. That night flying concerning to Faye Venzel.
It's scary.
Why so?
Well, something's happening, and they should have notified someone.
I asked Amanda Brown if she's concerned.
I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah, that's your typical American right there.
Townsfolk hoping whoever is behind the drones comes forward to put minds at ease. Lance Hernandez, Denver 7.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm concerned. I don't know. But this
is... you could sit all day and speculate as to, who would be doing it and why they're doing it. But because they're doing it at night, which is against the law, it's probably the military.
Yeah, it could be the military, it could be a private company, it could be a lot of things. But the fact is that nobody seems to know, and the government can't seem to figure it out either, at least if we're to believe them. Here's report number 2.
One big mystery Coloradans have been talking about this week, drones spotted flying over rural towns on our eastern plains.
There are now several investigations underway, including by local authorities and the FAA. Now, for now, nobody knows where these drones are coming from, and if they do, they're not telling. We've been getting hundreds of comments, pictures, and in video into our newsroom from people claiming to have seen the drones. It's enough of a concern Governor Polis is getting involved. He told us today, while it remains a mystery who is flying these drones and why, it's certain that they have caused a bit of a stir. And I want to get to the bottom of it and make sure no person or property is at risk.
CBS 4's Michael Abeda went drone hunting out east last night. Michael, people just want some answers.
Karen, these drones appearing at night have people all over Colorado talking, including the governor. Experts are looking into what's going on, and so are ordinary Coloradans.
It's just odd. It kind of reminds me of War of the Worlds.
People living in northeastern Colorado, like Michelle Eckhoff, have seen drones flying at night since mid-December.
It would rest easy on us if we knew just who was doing it and that we were safe.
The FAA is investigating but won't comment. Local law enforcement is also looking into it with the Office of Emergency Management.
Right now, we have not identified any discernible criminal incident or criminal activity related to these flies at night.
That's not to say they aren't taking the matter seriously.
If our residents here in Colorado are concerned, we're concerned. So we're trying to make sure that we have a good idea of what's occurring.
Drone enthusiast Kerry Garrison is also trying to get to the bottom of this. He says drones can fly at night with permission, but he wants to make sure people can spot the difference between drones and celestial bodies.
We have extremely clear skies that are causing space objects such as satellites and rocket boosters and other objects that are up there to be very, very visible.
He also says planes can be mistaken for drones. The difference? Drones are required to have one strobe light, while planes have more.
Typically, they're white strobes, but there's no rule that says it has to be white.
He thinks with knowledge and eyes in the sky, he and the people of Colorado can figure out what's going on.
If there is something that we cannot explain, then we hope to get video or photo of it to prove or disprove that there are drones or not out there.
Now, local law enforcement is having a meeting with their federal counterparts that are investigating this. That will be on January 6th to discuss what's going on. That meeting is not open to the public or to the press. One important takeaway from all this is that if you see a drone, do not shoot at it. It is illegal, and you could cause a fire when you hit the battery. At DIA, Michael Aveta, covering Colorado First.
Okay. So that's
Defense Intelligence Agency, Denver International Airport.
Isn't that interesting?
But isn't it the same thing? Isn't there a big? Isn't that where all the secret?
Well, there's a lot of weird stuff going on at the Denver International Airport. You bet. That's interesting. I wonder. Yeah,
it's the new World Order airport.
Yes, it is, and. As I recall, they closed down an airport that was larger and had more capacity, so that they could build it, make this one, put this one into service with all of its weird symbolism.
That's a very, very interesting story. Researching the drones. Yeah, and I actually have flown through there and have seen the murals. And I don't know. I understand that they've covered some of them up, because they caused such a stir. Once people were able to share information, and you see all this weird stuff in the airport, and you're just, it's really creepy, very creepy.
Yeah, there's gargoyles in suitcases, and there were pictures on the wall of, a dove that's being stabbed by a sword or something.
Right. Well, and the little girl and the little German girl in the coffin.
Yeah, that's right. All kinds of weird stuff. I mean, it's like epileptic, or epileptic. I mean,
apocalyptic.
Apocalyptic is the word I'm trying to say. Doom and gloom. Doom and gloom. Yeah, it's just really strange. And why do that in an airport? I mean, that's what you want to see when you're about to go on an airplane is scenes of war, people in gas masks, strange. But this drone thing, I don't like this. I don't like these drones, and I don't like the fact, we got nextgov.com. Pentagon is searching for domestic drone options. Acquisition Chief Ellen Lord shared details about the Defense Department's efforts to spark a U.S. ecosystem for small unmanned aerial systems and counter technologies. So that's one story. I'll put these in the show notes.
Well, I can think of a good reason why they would be doing that if they're looking for these solar farms, because the communist Chinese were investing in the solar farms. So if they're trying to find all of the locations where there are solar farms, that could be a positive thing, so that they know where they are.
Well, I have a hunch nothing's positive about it, because if it was positive, somebody would have done it out in the open.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, not necessarily. That's the problem, when your country is divided and you have traitors on one side that are trying to destroy your country, and then you have people that are on the other side that are trying to save your country. So, it's a really bad situation.
Yeah, it's a bad situation
because you don't know who to trust, and if what they're doing is for the benefit of which side.
Yeah. Well, here we see, FAA proposes tracking most drones in U.S. airspace. That's an article from The Hill. Also from nextgov.com, the Pentagon wants AI-driven drone swarms for search and rescue operations. Now, keep in mind, folks, they'll sell it for the purpose of search and rescue. But my question, Vicky, is how long is it going to be before these drones are armed, and they're flying in U.S. airspace? Because it's already happening.
I think the military drones already can be weaponized.
Well, they're not supposed to be flying them in U.S.
Thomas
airspace.
Barnett said a long time ago that it won't be very long. He said this in about 2004, that it won't be very long before they'll be able to take out one person.
Mm-hmm.
With across the world, find that person, take them out, like they did with Soleimani.
Yeah, yeah, and we circle all the way right back to that. Absolutely. And here we see from a publication called Tweaktown, testing begins on urban attack drones equipped with rocket launchers. Remember how we were talking about the Chinese really being the laboratory for the world? Well, here we have a testing on urban attack drones equipped with rocket launchers. A Chinese company is currently testing tiny urban attack drones that can see and shoot in the dark.
Now think about that for a minute. They could be miles away, but operating the drones remotely, come in and shoot people in a city, and there's nobody to catch, nobody for the cops to catch.
Now, one possible explanation to what this might be about, if it is in fact a U.S. government operation, I will say this. There is on the Federal Aviation Administration website, there is a notice of proposed rulemaking that's now available through March 2nd of this year, 2020. And it deals with UAS remote identification. It says drones or unmanned aircraft systems are fundamentally changing aviation, and the FAA is committed to working to fully integrate drones or UAS into the National Airspace System, or NAS. Safety and security are top priorities for the FAA, and remote identification of UAS is crucial to our integration efforts. So they're talking about remote ID being the ability of UAS in flight to provide identification information that can be received by other parties. Why do we need remote ID?
That is the same problem with guns, though.
Yes.
Law-abiding people follow the rules, follow the law, and people who are not don't.
Exactly, and you really took the words right out of my mouth, because if these people wanted to comply with the law, or if they wanted to make things out in the open, they would have told us what they were doing. They would have announced it to the public. Why alarm the public? There's no reason to do that. But what would they do if they don't? Let's say this thing was in place and they didn't identify. Would they go out there and shoot them down?
They should.
They should. But arguably, maybe they should anyway.
Well, except that it probably is the military.
Well,
although
and they're technically not
an interesting thing would be the drug cartels. That'd be an interesting way to deliver their drugs, wouldn't it?
But it's almost like they're mapping. It's almost like they're very close to the ground and they're looking at everything that's there.
That thought did occur to me that might be something that they were doing, because Google, Google has certain areas blocked out where you can't see.
I believe you can still contact Google and get your own house, your own property blocked out. I believe you can do that on Google. So, but the point is, Google, that's a satellite that's in outer space. Satellites can see a lot, but it can be a high resolution, certainly higher than we get access to. But at the same time, they can only see so much. But when you get a drone near the ground, potentially with radar, who knows what these things are carrying? It's almost like they're on some sort of a fishing expedition. But again, this is not journalistic. This is all conjecture. I have no proof of that statement.
Yep.
There you go. All right, people pods. We hope you'll join us again next week. And pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. And I'm sure we'll come loaded for bear again next week, Vicky.
No doubt.
All right.
No doubt about it.
Appreciate all you do. God bless you, folks. Pray for this. I think I already said that. All right, let's just get out of here.
Okay, all right. Bye, everybody.
We'll talk later. Been a long week.